What's up, everybody? I'm Aslan Hajimani, joined by managing editor of WarChant.com, the ultimate Seminole sports source, Ira Schoffel. Thanks for joining us here. If you could, hit that thumb up button indicating that you like this video. It matters, believe it or not. The internet overlords keep tabs of these things. And the more you hit that, the better off we all are. Happy Aslan means, happy viewers and all that kind of good stuff. Ira, we're here to, I guess, look back, but then also look ahead. We're always multitasking at warchant.com. This is the second part of a franchise series that we're running over on the website called the Exit Interviews, where you've already talked about running backs. Now we're moving on to wide receivers. But just to give folks a kind of an update of how we're doing this, what exactly is the sort of crux of this feature, and what are we trying to discuss and I guess determine and learn about this team?
Yeah, we've always done position previews going into the spring, and then we do them again going into the fall. But I felt like this time, this spring was unique because we actually, for the first time really since Coach Bowden retired, we actually got to see a lot of spring practice. I think I got to see 8 practices and scrimmages. I think I was at every availability. I'm pretty sure I was. You and Corey got to see some of them as well. You guys kind of rotated, tagged in and out. But because we got to see so much, thought it would be a good idea to do exit interviews instead of just position previews going into the spring, but actually do exit interviews coming out of it, because we actually got to see things. And so these are kind of my opinions, but not because my opinion is worth more than anyone else, just because I stepped up to do the project. But I figured, we can kind of hash a few of these things out. The running back position was pretty straightforward. I think Jashaun Corbin, everybody expects he's going to be the starter. If they go 2 backs, Lawrence Toafili will be right there. Lawrence Toafili, I think, may end up having more yardage than Jashaun Corbin, but I think Corbin's going to be the starter. They love him and everything he brings to that position. Wide receiver is a little more tricky because obviously we're going to go with 3 positions, 2 outside receivers and a slot receiver for this exercise. And there's a lot of options, but there's not a lot of slam dunks. So I think it's there's a lot of fodder for discussion, I think, at the wide receiver position.
All right. With that said, when this team opens up against Notre Dame September, who do you think will be the starting 3 receivers in your set there with 2 guys on the outside and a slot receiver?
I think Ontario Wilson's the closest thing to a sure thing. He wasn't dominant in the spring, but he was solid. And I thought he showed some potential to make big plays that we haven't always seen out of him. And I think that's probably a combination of maybe better quarterback play and also his maturity. He's now I guess 4th, 5th year in the system. So he's a guy that you would expect that from. And he's always shown flashes, but he hasn't been like a dominant receiver. I think he had 30 catches last year, 21 catches the year before, and that's in starting almost all of those games. So it's not like he's been real productive, but it seems like you would have to think he's by far the most consistent and accomplished of the returning wide receivers. And then I've got Andrew Parchment, the Kansas receiver, the guy who's not even on campus. Here's my one flyer, Aslan. He hasn't even officially signed, I guess, or enrolled at Florida State as a transfer until he graduates from Kansas this semester. But he's expected to be here in the summer. And I think he's a guy that will definitely be, I think if he doesn't start, I think it's a huge disappointment because, he's kind of the marquee guy. You brought in that receiver core from the transfer portal, and a couple of years ago, he caught 61 passes. So he's a guy that has done it on the college level at a Power 5 school. You'd like to think he can step in here from day one. And then my other guy is Keyshawn Helton, another guy who has played a lot, has started several games the last 2 seasons, but also hasn't been super productive. But he is much more experienced, and I feel like more consistent than a lot of those younger receivers. So I would give him the nod in the slot.
Kind of rough that one of the starting guys ranked 15th out of 18 possible pass catchers last season. But optimism is eternal when it comes to Keyshawn Helton. Obviously, one further year removed from that injury he sustained in the 2019 season as well. So hopefully he bounces back with a strong 2020.
And some of those guys rated above him are guys like 1 carry or 1 reception or things like that. So
Jordan Travis top 5. So yeah, Jordan Travis does everything. Yeah. Jordan Travis, if he could throw to himself, we'd be talking about maybe a New Year's Six Bowl. All right, so I think we all feel pretty comfortable. That seems to be probably, the standard response for most Florida State fans, who they think would start. I guess now when we start going down the depth chart, what are we thinking there? Because maybe outside of defensive line, there possibly can't be a group that has less proven commodities running with their second team than probably the receivers, right?
Yeah, I think it's really wide open. And, and I make a case in the article, if people want to read it, warchant.com, where I kind of go through each guy and why I think they're where they are. But there's certainly room for argument because, I've got a guy, for example, I've got Destin Hill with that second group just because of his accolades coming out of high school and just because there aren't a lot of other guys. A lot of the guys that we've seen in that receiver core. Talk about the Brian Robinsons and Kentron Portier and Jordan Young and a lot of those guys. We have seen them be not very consistent. So with Destin Hill, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's the highest rated receiver in that freshman class, and we're all impressed by Malik McClain and what he did this spring. Josh Burrell is a nice player. I've got him in the lower group, but I really think that Destin Hill is a guy they need him to come in and be an impact player to maybe be in that two deep rotation. Now the one drawback there is I actually did go back and look at some of Mike Norvell's offenses at Memphis, and freshman receivers haven't been real prolific. I mean, I think there is a lot of thinking, a lot of information that wide receivers have to digest. So it's not like a lot of freshman wide receivers have been real prolific in this offense, but I think they got to figure out a way to make it happen. Some of those other guys that you'd like to see the light come on for, the Brian Robinsons and some of those other guys, I don't know. You were out there a lot also. Would you feel confident going into the spring with some of those guys as saying, yeah, they're definitely going to be on my 2 deep?
No, I don't. I mean, I like Malik McClain. I think he's intriguing. Yeah. I think he's a guy that you feel gives you good depth, or maybe could even overtake if for some reason Pokey or Parchment doesn't quite live up to the expectation we have. Malik McClain's, I think, would probably be the next guy I would think could be poised to do that. But otherwise, I mean, Brian Robinson had a really good spring game, which that was the last thing we saw. Same thing with Mackenzie Milton. I don't think Mackenzie Milton had really that strong of a spring, but he saved his best for last. Same thing with Brian Robinson. So that's mildly encouraging, but it's hard to also then forget kind of what you saw the previous, 10 or 9 practices we were out there for. So it's hard.
And then, there's just not a lot of experience. And then some of the guys that do have some experience, like a Jordan Young, has been on campus now for, 4 years. And it hasn't happened yet. He was kind of in and out of the lineup in the spring. So it's just hard to count on him. So, I really think FSU, they need to have hit on Destin Hill. Andrew Parchment has to be the real deal. I mean, if Andrew Parchment's not the real deal, I think we're going to have real questions.
How would you define real deal with Andrew Parchment?
A starting wide receiver, ACC quality starting wide receiver, a guy that's going to catch, if you get good quarterback play. I do think the receiver numbers have to be graded on the curve the last couple of years because the quarterback play has been so bad overall. So it's like I say, Ontario Wilson has only caught 50 passes the last 2 years. We don't know. Maybe he was open a lot and the quarterbacks never saw him. So it's not necessarily totally fair to blame it on them. But I think, we assume the quarterback play is going to be much improved based on what we saw in the spring. And if it is, Andrew Parchment needs to be that closer to that level of what he was at Kansas 2 years ago. If he comes in and struggles to, hold a starting role or goes through games where you don't hear his name called, which is, I mean, how many guys have started games at wide receiver for Florida State the last 3 or 4 years that you never heard their name called? I mean, Warren Thompson started a bunch of games. Keyshawn, Ontario, all those guys have started games. And at the end of the day, you look and see they don't have any catches or one catch. Andrew Parchment has to be a guy that factors in because otherwise you're really banking on those freshmen like Malik McClain and Josh Burrell and Destin Hill to really kind of carry the water.
Yeah. Who knows, man? Maybe even a guy like Lawrence Toafili might end up being one of the leading receivers, right? Or even Corbin.
Right.
I mean, look at those guys right there. Right? I mean, 19 catches for Corbin and 12 for Toafili. So Toafili, one of the higher graded receiving guys for them as well, too. So
that is a good point. That they're not going to hesitate to put running backs at wide receiver. We saw that late last season. There's no question he'll do it again. And he's got some guys that have that ability. We mentioned Ja'Kai Douglas, who moved to wide receiver full time in the spring, but also Corey Wren, who does some of both. We know they want to use his speed, so he's a guy that could see some time at receiver. They've got a ton of options. The problem is just so few of them are proven. Like you said, very much like that defensive line.
Yeah. Hey, last note for me, though, I'm not always that concerned about depth at wide receiver. I'm a guy that I'd rather only have 4 or 5 guys to roll out there. But it does seem in this day and age, there's so many specific, I don't know if it's whether it's specific packages or there's just certain plays where they feel, maybe Corey Wren will be better on the wide receiver screen than Keyshawn Helton. My thing is just roll with one guy. The best offense we've seen from this place in a long time was pretty much 3 guys they rolled out there the entire time. Now they were supremely more talented than what's on this roster, but I know a lot of quarterbacks and not quarterbacks, but coaches, OCs want 7, 8 guys to roll at wide receiver, but I personally don't think you need that to get it done. And hopefully that's not the case because I don't think Florida State has 8 guys they can rely on. But if they can find 4 or 5, which they should be okay with an improved quarterback play, whether it's Jordan Travis building off what he did or Mackenzie Milton tapping into his old form. I just hope those things, improved offensive line, maybe the grad transfer, if they get another offensive tackle, that might be the most important thing for the receiving core because more time in the pocket, more time to make better decisions. So I'm not too panicked about it, but I know you were one of the first guys to really point out in 2020 when things were struggling that, hey, the receivers really aren't FSU caliber. So it was a valid criticism. Any last notes from you there, Ira?
No, the only other thing I would say, and I mentioned this in the article, and people can read the whole article at warchant.com. There's more information and more background on different guys, and some observations from the spring. But the other thing I would say is these player-run practices in the summer are going to be vital because, as I said, if Destin Hill is going to be a guy that can come in and make an impact as a true freshman without being here in the spring, a lot of that chemistry, a lot of that information he's going to have to gather is going to be in those player-run practices in the summer. And same thing with, I think Andrew Parchment when he gets here from Kansas. And that's where you look at a guy like Mackenzie Milton, not saying that he's going to be the starter or that he has to be the leader, but he has been a guy that's done that a lot in his career. He's got those qualities. So even if Jordan ends up being the guy, you'd like to think that those 2 guys, being experienced guys, will organize a lot this and really teach those new receivers because they're going to need something out of those guys.
All right. Plenty more on this nice, fully thorough breakdown of the wide receiver position, part of the exit interview series that we're running over on warchant.com, promo code WARCHANT30. Hit the thumbs up on the way out because Ira Schoffel just gave you a bunch of good insight, all for free right here on YouTube. Ira, thanks for the information, man.
Thanks, buddy.